BookTube, welcome back to my channel and welcome to A Closer Book. Today I'm going to do things a little bit differently. I'm going to be talking about these three books. Even though I read the books in this order, 1, 2, 3, I'm going to be talking about this one first so that I can talk about these two kind of together. First, or second, depending on how you look at it, I read Renegade's Pride by B.J. Daniels. I received this book in order to do a review, and if it was up to me, if I was going to the library or going to the bookstore, this is not a book that I would have chosen because of the cover. It is a Harlequin romance, and I feel like I know what these books offer, and so these are not things that intrigue me because I like to have a little mystery in my book. I like to have a little suspense. I don't like right by the numbers kinds of books. I don't want to know how things are going to work out. I'm going to meet these two people and they're going to be mean to each other, and then they're going to fall in love. They're going to rip each other's clothes off and have this passion, and then there's going to be some conflict, and then they're going to end up back together and going to spend happily ever after. That's what I've always thought that Harlequin romance books are like. So I wouldn't have chosen this book because I feel like it would offer that. This was very, very different. Renegade's Pride is the first in a series that this author is working on called the Cahill Ranch novel series. And it follows this family. Mother of the family, I think, has passed away. The father is in his advanced years, and people think that he's becoming senile. He's like a drunk, and he lives away from his children up in a cabin in the mountains. Some years ago, he claimed that he was abducted by aliens, and they're now spying on him. Every now and then, when he tries to tell people his story, he gets in trouble, and his son, who is the sheriff, locks him up. So the first character we meet is the father, Ellie, I think his name is. Then we meet his daughter, Lily, who as a young woman was in love with a man who was accused of a murder, and he left town. And he is now coming back to clear his name. And so there is a romance because it is Harlequin after all. So there is a romance when he returns. The story is about this guy coming back and trying to clear his name. Lily herself doing investigation, trying to figure out what the real story is behind the murder that happened almost 10 years ago. Then there are cases that her brother, who's the sheriff, is also working on. There are women who are disappearing from the town. There is intrigue. There is government corruption. There's some kind of a plant or storage facility that the people in the town aren't supposed to know what it is, but they might or might not be affected. So there are so many plots going on in here, and it's not confusing. It's not confusing at all. But this book is part of a series, so all the subplots that were mentioned are not resolved at the end of the book, and I don't necessarily like that, except the book was so well written that I feel like I would go on and read more of the series. But the main drawback for me was this cover and the fact that it was printed with this publisher, Harlequin Romance, because I felt like on my own I wouldn't have chosen this book, but it had so much to offer. I ended up giving it somewhere between a 3 and a 3.5 star rating because while I really liked the novel, I really enjoyed the writing style and this kind of small town Montana ranch vibe that was going on. It wasn't a great novel. It wasn't like literary fiction or anything, but the story was really interesting and really intriguing, and I feel like I'd want to read more from her. The first book that I should have talked about is Americanah by Chimamandah and Ngozi Adichie. This writer is so well known. I think everybody in America has heard about her. She's a writer of Nigerian descent. She's an immigrant living in the United States, and the characters in this book are Nigerians who immigrate from their country. So we meet Ifemelu, who's the main character, and Obinze. They're high school sweethearts. They go to college, and they're college sweethearts. After university, their paths go in different directions. Ifemelu gets an opportunity to come to the United States to go to school, and Obinze, even though he tries to come to the United States at first, he's not successful, but eventually he lands in England. The story becomes the tale of their immigrant experience, the hopelessness and the helplessness and the joblessness and the unemployment, underemployment, the corruption, the abuse, all the things that a lot of immigrants experience and have to find a way to live through without it breaking their spirit. The author characterized that very well, to the point where at some point you might want to just put the book down and kind of weep for the dreams that Ifemelu comes to the United States with, but sees them frittering away. Obinze, on the other hand, We get to see him go through his experience as an immigrant in England, and the juxtaposition of these two immigrant experiences gives you an opportunity to contrast and compare what it's like to be a young immigrant in the United States versus what it's like to be an immigrant in England, what it's like to be a male or a female living in these kinds of situations, comparing the kind of support that you get from people that you knew in your previous life and now are meeting in this new country that you're both trying to call home. This is a really long novel. It's 588 pages, and because of the time and breadth of experiences that you get to see in this long story, Chimamandah Ngozi Adichie does such a great job with character development, with showing you how people start off, how they evolve, and how their relationships change as they change. The characters are so well framed and sketched. It is a beautiful read in the first part of the book. Where this book fell down for me was in maybe the last 1/3 of this story, where I started to really dislike the characters, the way they became. And you know, it's something that I struggle with because I feel like I get so connected to characters, and then I see them doing things that just make me think, why would you do that? Like, all these choices that you made up to now, okay, I feel you, I'm with you, I understand where you're going with this, and then just like all of a sudden you change. Like, this person that I watched you becoming, why would you do that? So in the end, I gave this novel somewhere between a 3.5 and a 4-star rating. I enjoyed the weaving together of the two and then the multiple lives. I enjoyed the story of the two main characters, the back characters, who provided such adequate support to their characters to help them flesh out their story. I love the flashbacks, I love the flash forwards, I like the tales, I like the imagery, I like the language. I like the story of the immigrants, the story of the struggle, those who fail, those who succeed, those who, even as you're hearing their story, you're not sure whether they're failures or success stories. I like the comparison of the faces, the many faces of America. I like, you know, the title Americanah, which is a play on what it means to be American, but not really American, because you still represent some other part of America that someone from outside recognizes and calls you by that name. While I felt very connected with the characters at various times in the story, I didn't love them all the way through. So this wasn't a perfect story because it shaped up to be one story and it ended up being something else that I didn't love or approve of. Throughout the reading, I really thought that this was going to be a 5-star read, but in the last 100 or so pages, it left me so underwhelmed that I couldn't give it the coveted 5 stars. So I knocked it down to somewhere between a 3.5 and a 4-star. I'm not going to be petty. I'm going to say it's a 4-star read. But if you've read it, I would love to hear your thoughts, your comments. I know a lot of people love this novel. I just don't think it's a 5-star read. At least not for me, it wasn't. And then we get to The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead, that I have been wanting to read since last summer and finally picked up. It was the last book that I read in March, and while I was filming my March wrap-up, I hadn't finished this book. In fact, I was somewhere around the halfway mark and I was thinking, okay, I think I'm gonna love this book. I feel like this book is gonna be a 5-star read for me. I was so convinced that I was gonna love this book. In the end, I rated it somewhere between a 3 and a 3.5 star. This story is of the Underground Railroad, which, if you don't know the story, the Underground Railroad is exactly what it says. It was a transport mechanism that was constructed underground during the slave period by former slaves, runaway slaves, and abolitionists, the whites who supported the idea of enslaved people escaping. So they constructed this underground transportation system that would allow runaway slaves to escape and to have a way to travel between the place that they were escaping from and to some new community or new state that would allow them more freedom and a chance of a new identity and a new life. I like that the author, through this book, started a conversation that I think a lot of people need to have. We talk a lot about race every day, and I feel like this book allows us to kind of appreciate in a better way some of the struggles that the African Americans have dealt with over the years. So I appreciate the fact that Colson Whitehead, through this book, started this conversation, started it in such a big way, because this book became a bestseller. I think a #1 New York Times bestseller. Oprah Winfrey put it on her book club. So this book got a lot of hype, and I think it's such a great book for everyone to read, or at least to know about and to know the backstory of, so that they can have that conversation and maybe inform themselves and try to inform others about the history of our nation and of a particular demographic in this nation. The story, however, is about a woman, Cora, who is born on a plantation in Georgia. And her mother has left her, so she's what's considered a stray. She doesn't know her father, of course, and her mother is gone. And so she's just being raised by the fellow slaves in the plantation. And one of her fellow slaves invites her to leave the plantation. And so the Underground Railroad is the story of that journey to freedom and the discovery of what freedom really means, while they use the established Underground Railroad system to move from one place to the next. The Underground Railroad was so much more than just a physical transport. It also required a mental transport. Like in the book, Whitehead talks about how slaves and free men actually walk different. Their posture is different, the way they're able to make eye contact or not. So what does it mean to be enslaved, and what does it mean to be free? And how do you move from one state to another? Not just one physical, geographical state, but one mental state to another. So there were elements of this book that I really enjoyed. I did not, however, like the main character. I felt like that totally detracted from the story for me. I tried to connect with her. Of course, I'm not able to put myself into the mental state that she was, and I don't want to judge her for the decisions that she made, but it was very hard for me to feel connected to her. And so I don't know if that is why the book didn't wow me in that way. So I gave this high ratings because of what the book meant, but I didn't love the characters. One thing that Colson Whitehead mentioned in this book was the comparison between people who had been born into slavery in the Americas and the people who were newly captured. So they had been born as free people in Africa and kidnapped into slavery. And it made me remember the people. Now, a lot of the people who were enslaved came from West Africa. Nigeria is West Africa, which is where these characters came from. So here we have Africans who are desperate to leave their country in Africa and move to the Americas for better opportunities. And here we have Africans who are born into freedom and are kidnapped and brought to America, not because of their own choice and not for anything that is going to make their lives better in any way. So I felt like it was so important to read these books around the same time and just kind of go through that thought process of what it really means to be an immigrant, what it really means to have left your country. And because this is Africa, I'm focusing on Africa, but what it really means to leave Africa, to leave your home and to go somewhere else. I myself am an immigrant. I left Jamaica more years than I want to admit right now. Coming to America for what I thought was going to be a better life, a better opportunity. And both of these books explore that idea that, you know, immigration is not perfect. The immigrant's story is not great. The person who is kidnapped as a slave is not an immigrant, the way these people were immigrants. A few weeks ago, Ben Carson was in the news because he made this comment that likened slaves to immigrants, and he kind of spoke about them as though they were the same kind of group. And there was a whole lot of backlash about that statement. But, you know, the comparison, of course, there are lots of things that they go through that make them similar in so many ways. And so I had a really great reading month. These two books, as well as this one, really just made my reading experience in March even better. So that's a closer look at these three novels. Please, if you've read any of them, go ahead and leave me a comment down below so we can chat about what you thought, whether you agreed with my opinions or you have a completely different opinion. No problem. I'd love to share ideas and have a discussion with you about any or all of these books. So thanks for watching. Hope to see you again soon. Until then, happy reading. Bye.